and welcome to the Your Good News podcast with me, Katherine Getty. It's easy to believe the news around us that the world is dark and the future is the same. But what if we chose something different? What if we chose to find the good news in each day? This podcast is a collection of interviews with friends, mentors, colleagues on their good news. From business to health to politics and everything in between, it's my hope that you leave with a boost and find your good news.
I couldn't be more excited for you to hear this next interview. I share more about how I met Matt Windsor as we begin to talk, but this episode is filled with interesting and thought-provoking tidbits about the home buying process. From breaking down the logistics to how you don't internalize the no's, he delves into how the moments along the way to purchasing a place can be enjoyable. And I have to think that it's a good reminder to just break down the overwhelming in any situation to find the good, to find the enjoyment. Without further ado, my interview with Matt Windsor. Well, I am so excited to have my next guest on, Matt Windsor. Matt and I first met back in 2016 at a cycling studio, Flywheel, rest in peace. And I worked the early morning shifts, and I got to meet Matt and his dear wife, Lauren. And as you can imagine, waking up at 4:30 to be there at 5 was not always fun, but I was always looking forward to when Matt and Lauren were going to be in the studio. I am so excited for Matt to share his journey, and let's just jump into it. Matt, welcome.
Thank you. So happy to be here.
This is going to be a ton of fun. I'm so excited. I personally have a lot of interest in what we're going to be talking about today. I'm in a much better place than I was a few years ago, and you're like, let's talk about apartments or condos. But I always like to begin by asking my guests, what's your good news, Matt?
Yeah, so we have a 5-month-old, and he is sleeping through the night consistently. So we're meeting in the morning today, and so I feel refreshed because I got a good night's sleep for once. So that's good news today.
Matt, you're not the only person that's talked about sleep being very important. Maybe I need to go down this path, but I think that sleeping through the night, we take it all for granted, but that's amazing. I'm so happy to hear he's doing well.
One thing when you stay up too late watching Netflix is another thing when you're being woken up by a human who needs it. It's nice.
Yeah, I can only imagine. Well, Matt, in the intro, I shared about your passion for the DMV, District of Columbia, Maryland, and Virginia, and your work as a real estate agent. But I would love to set the foundation kind of with your transition into being a real estate agent. For 10 years, you worked in PR. How did you know that you wanted to make that shift? Did you feel ready to make the shift? Let's talk about that.
Yeah, so I worked for a decade in public relations. I was at a couple small boutique firms, and I was at Animal Planet out at the Discovery headquarters, and then I moved over to Marriott and their corporate headquarters in Bethesda for the last year and a half of that career. It sounds so cliche to be like, oh my God, when you know, but I just kind of knew and felt like it was time to go. So, there are a lot of people who say like, oh, real estate was my calling and I knew I wanted to do it. And that was kind of true for me.
Yeah.
So, like, you'll be a good real estate agent. You would be great at that. But for me, like, my time at Discovery at Animal Planet was so amazing. It was one of those jobs that I never felt like going to work.
Yeah. And
then a lot of those jobs got moved to different parts of the country, and that's when I chose to move on to Marriott. And that was like really awesome. I mean, I was doing public relations for their sales marketing, so like Coachella and NFL and yeah. So like, it seems weird to be like, yeah, I walked away from that, but honestly, the kind of catalyst for me was there was like some big event we were working on that I didn't really have control over, and I had to miss a Nationals playoff game against the Dodgers back in, was it 2015 or 2016? And I was in New York for it. It was game 5. And I remember telling Lauren, like, today it's going to be this baseball game, but in 5 years, it could be my kid's baseball game. And so I wanted to have a little bit more control over, my life and my career and work for myself. So that was the real catalyst for it. And then I just kind of circled in on what I wanted and jumped 2 feet in.
I think that's amazing. It's like, I'm hearing you say, it's like listening to our gut. And there's been a lot of episodes where we talk about listening to our gut, but it's like so often we choose not to listen to our gut for external reasons of whatever it may be. Was it kind of once you knew and you jumped in full feet, what would you say to someone who's thinking about jumping into real estate or thinking about making a transition in their career or in a relationship or whatever it may be? what advice would you give to them?
Yeah, so two different questions there that I'm
first. Just unpack them.
I'll answer the second one first, which would be what I'd say to somebody who's just thinking about moving out of their career. And, it wasn't just a snap decision. There was a lot of planning. There was a lot of stressing. There was a lot of sleepless nights. Like, we were able to, take a home equity line of credit to have available in case I failed miserably. So, there was definitely some security with it.
Yeah.
So use the transition. But yeah, if you're sitting in a job where just unhappy, yes, not to be cliche again, but get out of it. Find something that gives you passion. Especially if it's something that you're going to, try to set up things in this weekend. Yeah, great. I have a positive experience. I'm sure there's many people who negative, but I think it all just kind of depends on the situation. In terms of jumping into real estate,
yeah,
especially with the pandemic last year, when and the market's been so crazy, you'd be surprised. I probably do 2 phone calls or coffees a week with people who are like, "Hey, so I've been sitting here unemployed, and I'm getting my real estate license, or I want to get my real estate license because it looks so fun and easy on those shows." And
you're like, "Let me tell you."
Yeah. So, look, there are ways you can be very successful in it, but it is a very competitive career right now. I got into it about 4 years ago, worked for a very successful team who helped train me the right way and teach me the right way, which enabled me to go out and start my own team. But, there are stats where I think 50-60% of realtors don't make it past the first year, and we're in a situation now where I think I saw something in the Washingtonian the other day. There's 50 agents for every active buyer in the DMV. So it's competitive, and you might think in your head oh, for sure, my best friend who I've known my whole life will definitely buy a house with me. I know they're thinking about it.
Yeah.
You'd be surprised how many times that doesn't happen, and you're your built-in client base isn't there. So, look, if you're thinking about doing it and you want to jump into real estate, hey, I'm always happy to talk to people because that's how I got to be successful in business.
Yeah.
But it is a challenge. There's a lot that comes with it.
And I think, just to kind of tap into that a little bit more, you're talking about kind of cutting through the noise, it sounds like, of there's you see so many people that are trying to buy houses. What skills do you think came from PR that helped you in this, or what things have you learned along the way that you think have enabled you to be successful?
Yeah, that is a awesome question, because you kind of hit the nail on the head with when I thought about okay, I don't want to be doing this public relations career anymore.
Yeah.
What can I do? And the main thing for me was where do those skills translate? So right off the bat, when you're pitching, one of my big shows at Matt was finding Bigfoot. When you're calling up the and saying, do you want to, write an article about these 4 guys who chase Bigfoot around? You get used to hearing no quite a bit. So, negotiating in real estate on behalf of my clients, in my mind, I'm like, hey, the worst that's going to happen is no. So I've got that built in. That's been no matter what I've done. So that's something. But then also just being communicative, bringing the branding and marketing aspect of my career from the past into now my personal brand for me. So those are things that help transition. But then, I always kind of joke a little bit. Anybody with $500 per course and you can read a comic price.
Yeah.
The barrier for entry into real estate is very, very low. You can take the test as many times as you need to pass. You can get online courses. You can do them in person in 1 weekend if you want to. So
yeah,
getting into it, it's they make you memorize how many feet are in an acre, a little over 43,000. But what they really should be doing is asking you, hey, can you eat a sweet green salad while you're driving between appointments?
Which is very difficult.
Yes, I've gotten very good with a fork and driving. Sorry, drivers. But there are a lot that just aren't in those courses, breaking down the contract, really learning how to show property, and gel with your clients. The follow up and the grind that you really need is something that a lot of people don't have right off the bat. And working with a successful team when I first got into this was a way that I could just learn a little bit by osmosis, kind of see what they were doing to be successful and figure out how that worked for me. But it was a huge help to have all those additional resources. On that team.
Yeah.
A lot of that stuff just isn't covered in the entry courses.
It's interesting too. I think that we say all the time, we being the royal we, of the worst thing people can say is no, but sometimes that's really hard. How have you figured out how to not internalize the no and just keep going for the yes?
Yeah, I mean, you're right, and that is something that people say all the time. Like, oh, the worst thing you hear is no. But for a lot of people, like, rejection is tough.
Yeah,
Really,
it's not great.
Yeah, in your personal life and in your professional.
We can unpack that another day.
Yeah, I think a long time ago, like I said, I got used to letting that roll off my back a little bit, and it's tough sometimes not to take it. Personally, in PR, I don't think I ever really did, because it's like, hey, I have this job, this is what I'm pitching. Like,
yeah.
That they have to write. If they say no, okay, fine, I'll try it another day. And I always just looked at no as like, okay, if I've got this person on the phone for a couple of minutes, how can I like build a relationship or a network with them so it gets a little bit confident. Real estate's a lot tougher for me because I really do take it personally. Like, I really feel for my clients. Like, I put myself in their shoes because I've been in their shoes. I've bought a couple of them. I've lost out on offers. I've sat there for 2 weeks waiting for a response, and you're nerve-wracking and you're checking your phone. Real estate's a lot like dating.
Oh my gosh.
Should I call again right now? Do I look desperate? But, it's like I do feel for my clients. And it does sound a little bit cliche, but the easiest thing with no in real estate for me is I always kind of let them know, because this is how it's worked out personally for me, is the right house will be out there. So if it's not that one, and even if you thought, oh my God, like that was just the most perfect one, then maybe it wasn't meant to be. And that's how often like clients come back to me now and they're like, I was devastated when we lost out on that one condo. And it may not be anything they did. They may have put together the most amazing offer and somebody just had a better one.
Yeah.
But then they'll come back to me and be like, and now I'm so glad I don't live on that corner, because I walk on my way to work and they're doing construction every day. Or they're like, I just love my place so much and I found the best bar that I never would have known about. So, there are ways to spin those kind of no's and the victories later on. But yeah, it's tough not.
Yeah. I mean, there's just... And we're going to delve into kind of the emotions of home buying a little bit later, but let's transition and talk about, I think the entire idea of buying a house or buying a condo can be, I know personally, incredibly overwhelming because there's a lot of stress, there's a lot of paperwork. Let's talk about kind of what's your approach into buying? How has that been successful when you're helping people through that process?
Yeah, so you're right. It is extremely stressful. There's a lot of information that just isn't out there and available. So, especially with my first time home buyers, but with any home buyer that I sit down with, I really like to start with taking them through this personalized home buyer's guide that I put together. And I tell everybody up front, I'm like, look, there is no course in college or high school that taught you how to buy. If you went to your parents, you would think,
they know nothing.
God, I remember when, Lauren and I bought our first house and our parents were like, 5% interest rates, the bank should be embarrassed. It was 18 when we bought. So, like they're out of touch on it. And then some of the stuff is regionally different. So, if you grew up in New York, California, where, they have lawyers really involved, like a lot of times those parents will say to their kids, I don't understand the process here. And so, it is different. It's different everywhere. So the first thing I do is I just sit people down and say, let me take you through all of this and explain the process to you, because you've heard so much chirping from news, from friends, from, everyone around you, your parents, that like, let's just cut through that clutter.
Yeah.
And explain the process to you from start to finish. And then my approach really is it's all about my clients. So this is the biggest investment they're going to make. So I want them to feel like they're in control of the process through help. And I want them to feel like they get it on their terms. So, in DC, it's not uncommon. Like I'll get a client who works at the State Department and says, hey, you can't reach me between 9 and 5. Cool. So we're only going to look at houses between 5 and 8 o'clock. Or even down to, I have some clients who go into a house and they're like, I want to talk about every detail as soon as I can possible. And I have other clients who are like, I'm going to write everything down and then email you later with my thoughts, like even better. So first and foremost is it's about you and how you want to process and approach it, because I am a advocate for you in it. I'm a big part of your team, but it really should be done on your terms. And then the second thing that I tell, all of my buyers is my main 2 goals are, number one, I want you to be happy in the home that you find. So I don't care how long it takes. It might be a week, it might be a month, it might be a year. We might decide after a couple of weeks, you need to rent for a few more months to save to really get the thing you're looking for. But at the end of the day, when you get those keys, I want you to be really happy in your home. And then the second thing is I want to think about your right now and what looks like your needs right now, but I also want to keep an eye on the future too. So, in a couple different ways. So if we're looking at homes and, you are like, oh, this is great, it doesn't have a bathtub. It's like, well, we probably need a bathtub in case you have a kid in the future or your buyer's coming with a kid. Like they're going to need to give their kids a bath. So like something that could benefit you at resale. Or say you get this like amazing job opportunity in a couple weeks and you have to move. Can we rent your home for what your mortgage payment is so you're not losing money? Or can we sell it and you don't have to write a check to the buyer to sell your own property? So if at the end of the day, you're happy when you go home and we have protected your future and got you something that you enjoy right now, then I've done my job.
Man, that's just like such a novel way. I feel like it's a novel way to look at it. And I've heard so many, and I think I said this to you a couple years back when we were talking, I've heard so many horror stories of experiences. And so I think it's really refreshing and I hope people take away from it. It's like, it can be an enjoyable experience. Do you think that HGTV has sometimes ruined the market? That just it pops in my brain because I feel like now I'm like, the crown molding doesn't look great. You're like, that doesn't matter. Like that's not, I don't know, real resale. I don't know. I'm going to stop using terms that are realtor like.
I am always mad at Chip and Joanna for, shiplap is not something that exists quite readily here. You can add it in. So, but yeah, and not just like the, HGTV terminology and flipping and crown moldings and marble countertops and all that. But like, I respect, and I think we'll probably talk about it a little more, but like, I respect my clients' budgets. I don't push them. And so like that whole HGTV, I'm going to show you everything you want, but it's $200,000 more than your budget. Like that doesn't serve any purpose. Like,
I know.
It can be real. So, that is something that, has gotten into people's psyche. They're like, okay, you're going to show me the crap or the awesome house that I can't afford, and then you're going to show me the crap house that I can't afford. Like, that's not the other thing too is like, so we're not going to be going out to lunch and flipping tables and throwing drinks in each other's faces to negotiate deals. Like, it's not Bravo as much as you would think it would be. Like, a seller wants to sell, a buyer wants to buy. So we already are both coming into a real estate transaction with a common goal in mind. So it's like, let's be positive and get there together.
Novel. I didn't even think about Netflix shows of selling Sunset. So you're telling me that it's not like selling Sunset in DC.
Yes.
That's devastating to know.
You would be shocked how many text messages I got last year during the pandemic. We're like, hey man, it's selling Sunset. Is that really like how it is? It's like, no.
That is very, very produced. Well, let's talk about, your approach kind of like emotionally. I feel like you talked about you really want someone to be happy and you want to think about not only the right now, but the future. But there are so many emotions that are kind of in that excitement, fear, overwhelm. How do you kind of help your clients through that process in a way that they kind of feel comfortable at the end of the day? Is it the education piece? Is it the communication? Is it a mix of everything?
Yeah, it's a little bit of all of kind of things that you're touching on. So, number one, just by educating my clients up front, that home buyer's guide that, I mentioned before, like I really break down and explain the process, like soup to nuts, A to Z. Here's how I break it down into 6 easy steps. Like 6 steps, that's all you need to buy. And I tell my clients, I'm like, look, I don't expect you to remember every aspect of this, but like when we're out seeing houses, an educated buyer is a good buyer. You can actually cut through some of the emotional decisions and the anxiety and being overwhelmed if you're coming to it from a place of like, yes, my real estate agent is now talking to me about appraisal contingencies and waiving certain things. And I may not understand it fully, but he explained it some, and now we can have a more informed conversation so that it doesn't feel so overwhelming. So the education piece of it is a big one. And again, like I said, there's just so much misinformation out there. So getting you a clear picture of what the process is going to be like really helps that. And then, you mentioned the communication aspect of things. Like, yes, like I said, I'll communicate with my clients in any way they want. Text messages become super, super popular. I'm also kind of a little bit old fashioned and harking back to my PR days. Like I want to pick up the phone and call you and talk all the time. Some people don't want to do that anymore, which is totally fine. I like to hear their voices, but yeah, I'm going to be in constant communication with you. Like my goal is to, follow up until you're like, okay, we get it. Yes. Like, but I will never stop looking throughout the days for my clients. If like something perfect comes up or if I hear about it, like they're going to hear about it. And we're going to be, really communicating as much as they want to and feel comfortable with. And then the third piece is just kind of like being there for them emotionally. Like, again, this is my client's search. Like this is their home. It is going to be a big monumental moment in their life. So I want to simplify something truly significant. And so I want to manage all those little like pieces that come into play in this, so they can really just focus on the houses. So I tell my clients all the time, I'm like, look, you are an expert in knowing what you want, and I'm an expert in real estate and getting you what you want.
Mic drop. I mean, that's like, it's just, I think it's such a refreshing way to like think about the home buying process, and it like puts people at ease and thinking about, okay, I can know what I want. I can know my budget. I can understand kind of those wish list items, but Matt knows where to find things. He understands kind of the different, pushes and pulls in the market. We talk about the pandemic. The market has, I feel like, exploded in the last year. I think I heard some statistics like 2020 was like the biggest year for home buying, or I'm going to butcher the statistics, so I'm going to stop at that point. But was it kind of exciting, crazy? What was it like in 2020? Has it continued into 21?
Yeah. So, I mean, don't feel bad about butchering any data, because I feel like one of the knocks on real estate agents is we can cut the data like 30 different ways to, make our point however we want.
It's kind of like politics.
Yeah, I mean, look, you'll see like 6 different agencies here in town will have, an ad next month saying how they were the number one in something the month before. So yeah. they're all true if, you look at the data a certain way. So, so yes, you're right. Like last year ended up being crazy for home buying for, a couple different reasons. Number one, interest rates were historically low. They are still historically low. They actually have been hovering lower the last few weeks than they were at any point last year. So that made it, pretty challenging. It put a lot more buyers into the marketplace because you could borrow more money. So that's what made it challenging. Yeah. Then we had people who were wanting to move because all of a sudden their spaces weren't fitting their COVID lifestyles. You needed an outdoor space. You needed an office space. You couldn't go to the bar that around the corner from your condo, which is why you bought it. So there were more active buyers just because of a need. And then with interest rates being so low, we had a lot of sellers who were refinancing to stay in their homes because now their homes just got cheaper and they may have already loved them. So the inventory was shorter than it ever was. So that really bubbled up to be, sort of a frenzy and a seller's market with regards to like single family homes, row homes, townhomes in the areas. Like, yes, there was a little bit of a push to the suburbs and those properties got really crazy. The flip side was, and especially, if we got any first-time home buyers looking, like the condo market in DC, Northern Virginia, actually did a little bit of the reverse. So we had a lot of first-time home buyers saying, you know what, maybe now isn't the time to make this jump and I'll keep renting, or, I'll go live with mom and dad and save some money for a little bit. And they put those searches off. We had a lot of investors who, all of a sudden, if their tenants had moved out, couldn't get the rents that they had been getting for several years because people just weren't renting at those amounts because they were furloughed or, lost their jobs. And then we had look, DC, if you pop your head out your window right now, you'll see 30 cranes in the sky. And a lot of those are apartment buildings. And so a lot of those apartment buildings started reaching out and saying, we'll give you 3 or 4 months free rent. And God, I had one client last year, we were looking and he's like, hey, I'm going to put my search on hold because I just got this apartment with 3 free months and it has a golf simulator and a Peloton gym. And I'm like, yeah, you should definitely go do that. So, so that just bubbled up to be, there was more inventory. Investors were dumping properties, more people weren't actively looking. And so the condo market actually stayed a little bit stagnant. There were a lot of really good deals to be had last year.
There's so many, it's so fascinating because I myself left DC for 4 months and I was like, this sucks that my apartment, sorry to my landlords, sat. And I was like, there's so many things like that you're thinking about. It's this could have been a good time, but it was a great time to save. So, okay, someone's saving, they feel like they're ready. What would you tell someone to be prepared? And I put that in air quotes because I feel like, how do you get yourself ready for this process? Is it gathering all the paperwork? Is it finding the right real estate agent? Because I feel like sometimes, to your point, it's someone knows somebody, but it's you really got to have a really good relationship with that person and open lines of communication to make it successful.
Yeah. So, the first thing that I always recommend is you just hit it, is you get an agent. When you're a home buyer, you're not paying for your agent. So, you have an agent that's dedicated to helping you. If you just are looking on Redfin or Realtor.com or Zillow and you see, oh, there's an open house and you go in, then odds are you're going to end up having to work with the seller's agent. The seller's agent is who knows if they're actually going to, really have your best interest at heart. So the sellers pay the commission, they pay both sides. So if you're a buyer and you're working with a buyer's agent, like it's not going to cost you anything. So number one, like get in, somebody who can help you through the process and cut through the clutter. Number two, like make them your advocate and lean on them. So I always tell my clients, like first time I meet them is like, look, I am one part of your team. Let's build you the best team out there. So I usually make recommendations for my clients of really good, solid local lenders so that they can talk to them and get an idea of, what their budget power is. And I always tell all my clients, like number one thing, if you do your pre-approval process, they're going to pull some paperwork. So yes, you're going to need some tax forms and pay stubs, and they're going to run a soft credit check on you to see, how you qualify for, rates. Can you get the better ones? Or you're going to be in the middle tier, but they're going to spit out a number for you that's going to seem like way more than what you ever thought you could purchase. That's great because it's all based off of your debt to income ratio and your credit scores. But if you're like me, I live on a budget every month. So you probably have an idea in mind of what you want to spend on your houses. So then you just tell them, hey, I want my mortgage payment to be no more than this. And then that's the number like you bring back to your agent. But having a good local lender is just as important as having a good real estate agent. And most of us who are doing this full time, selling high volume, like we have a good crop of really good local lenders here. So we can get you set up so that automatically off the bat, you've got a really good agent and then you've got a really good lender in your corner. And that can make all the difference for you when it comes time to, make an offer and win in competitive situations. And then, it's just be open-minded, be ready to look in a couple different areas, like, be flexible with, some of the things that might've been hard lines. Like I tell my clients, the first few times we go out to see properties, I need you to be so brutally honest with me because number one, I don't own the houses, so you can't offend me. But number two, if you're not giving me your honest reactions and opinions, then we're not going to like put the pieces together and figure out exactly what you want. So you might've thought like, I absolutely have to have marble countertops. Thanks HGTV. But you might find out like, oh no, I'm cool with granite or quartz or maybe a butcher's block. You never know. But keep an open mind so you can really figure out what you're looking for so that after those first couple of times of looking for homes, we're just really going out to see properties that you actually would want to buy. Like you have a busy life, you have work, you have social life. Like let me do all that work and ping you and say, hey, Katherine, like I found 2 awesome places. Like we got to jump and go see them today.
It's so fascinating. Like, I think too, like I've heard so many friends talk about like, yeah, I didn't realize that this would be something I would really like or be interested in. And so I think talking about having an open mind, it's like, yeah, these are the things that we need thinking about right now and future, as you talked about, but being open to like what it looks like. You shared prior that you have a new brand coming out, Moments with Matt. Can you share a little bit more about this? What does it mean for the home buying process and that experience in general?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about this kind of with some of the answers so far that we talked about. But, for me, God, I remember when Lauren and I bought our first home and it's like a overwhelming emotion of like, I don't know, you feel like you're an adult all of a sudden. And you're like, this is
life comes at you fast.
Right? It's like when you think back in 20 years, you'll, remember the big moments. You'll remember, the day you got married, the day you had a kid, the day you bought a home, when you graduated from college. Like those are those big monumental moments in your life. But there are so many teeny tiny moments that lead up and make all of those things. So my Moments with Matt is kind of based on the fact that like moment can mean 2 things. It can mean something truly significant, or it can mean something fleeting and, that just passes by. So for me, like buying a home is one of the most monumental moments of your life. Let me manage all of those little moments that go into the home buying process so that when you get to the settlement table and you get your keys, you're like, all I can remember is just buying our home and what an amazing feeling that was and how awesome the process was throughout. Because I don't want you to worry about all those little tiny things. Like that's my job to manage all that and, cut through that clutter for you so that at the end of the day, it's just, really about you and your big moment. And so that's kind of the tagline, the brand launch. And in partnership with that, I'm going to be putting out, some new content. I'm going to be calling Moments with Matt, where we're going to be talking about little video clips, social media cuts to talk about all the moments in the real estate process. Because as I said before, an educated buyer is a good buyer. So like, why wouldn't I share like some of these little tidbits that people just don't know and there's no resource for?
I love this and I can't wait to share. We'll put all the information in the show notes and repost it because I think it's a really cool way to think about the home buying process where it kind of takes, when you say this, it like takes away the stress a little bit because it's like, okay, well, someone's in my corner, someone like that advocate's in my corner to help me through those
those little things, steps along the way to get to the point where it's like, oh, this is awesome. Like I can actually enjoy this and be happy as you were hoping.
No, and I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but like the other thing too, when you were asking about like, communicating with your clients and making them feel good about the process, like I tell all my clients up front, like the most sad day for me is when they settle, because I become friends with a lot of my clients. And then all of a sudden we go from talking 5 times a week and seeing each other 2 times a week to like, now they're just, living in their home a couple times a year at my happy hours and events. But the other benefit that I always tell my clients is I'm honest and upfront. Like, this is a business for me and it's a profession. So I want to develop a lasting relationship with my clients so that not only do I sell them their first home now, but then I can, when they need to sell that one and then buy their next one, like they come back to me. 95% of my business comes from word of mouth referrals from my past clients. And that's by design. Like I tell all my clients, like, I want to do such a good job for you that whenever you are at a bar and you hear somebody at the next table mention, I want to buy a house, like you jump across, like, hey, you have to call my realtor right now. And, so I don't hide that by telling you up front, hey, listen, I'm going to do this amazing job for you now, but it's also so that you continue to be my advocate after the fact and you push my name out there and help me build my business and brand. Like then everybody knows, like, yes, there's an incentive for him to do a really good job and really look out for us.
I mean, there's just like so many nugget drops I like to say along the way. It's like the importance of listening to your gut when you're in a career, to starting with someone who's going to be your advocate and be an educated buyer in the process, to having someone along the way who's going to handle those tiny moments so that you get to enjoy the big moment. Matt, before we wrap up, is there anything else you want to share with us?
Yeah. So the biggest thing is, you and I have talked about before, if you're a first-time home buyer, if you're a second-time home buyer, whatever like that, like there's a lot of apprehension and anxiety about getting into, home buying. And there's a lot of people who never even think to start the process because they're like, there's just no way I could afford it. So don't put that aside, because look, over the course of your life, like, owning a home could be the thing that sets you up for generational wealth for years to come. And it could also be a better investment than, the rent that you're paying. Like, don't pay someone else's mortgage. So you don't need to have 20% down to buy a house. Like, you can do it for as little as 3%. There are programs available, and, I'm licensed in DC, Maryland, Virginia. There's programs available for first-time home buyers or people at certain income levels to get benefits and tax breaks and things of that nature. So if you're even just thinking about it, like, again, it doesn't cost you anything to like give me a call and we can sit down and I'll explain to you the process and help you get, pre-approved and figure out like, oh wait, yes, I could buy right now. So that's just a big thing, especially if we have home buyers out there. It's like, it doesn't hurt. It doesn't cost anything just to like make that phone call and be like, is this something I could do? Especially if it's a goal for you. People
run, don't walk to work with Matt. He's fantastic, as you can tell. Matt, where can people find you on social media, your website, everything like that?
Yeah. So my website is www.mattwindsorrealestate.com and Instagram at Matt Winds, MattWinds. And, you can see a couple of my bus ads on 14th Street and Google Matt Windsor Real Estate and it'll pop up. But any way you want to, you can reach me.
Well, awesome. This will all be in the show notes. And Matt, thank you so much. I hope people have just like soaked it in, get excited about the home buying process, because it's not as scary as it seems.
It's not. And Katherine, let me just say before we go that I also look forward to seeing you every day at 5:30 too.
Yeah, I mean, there were some mornings that I don't know if that was true, but that's okay. I we tried at Flywheel.
Yes.
Rest in peace.
Did our best.
Well, that was fun. He really helped me refocus on how overwhelming moments can be made fun, how we can find folks to work with, that we don't have to do things alone. His lessons, may you be in the market for a home or just taking his lessons to your life, are surely ones to remember. If you liked, please subscribe, share, leave a review. To learn more about the podcast, visit my Instagram at Katherine Getty, my name, and then join us next week for another episode of the Your Good News Podcast.